Okay, so in the last few lectures, we saw that, Descartes gives us this skeptical possibility, or several skeptical possibilities, possibilities that would show we don't know anything. We could be dreaming at any time, so we wouldn't know what we think we know because, weird stuff happens in dreams and it doesn't really fit with reality, right? We could also be the victim of some powerful and evil being, right? And we can't really prove that that's not the case. But, as I said, the simple possibility you're mistaken doesn't really seem to be a great argument to think you don't know anything or that you are mistaken, right? It's a weird argument. It wouldn't stand up anywhere else in life, right? The mere possibility that you are wrong means you don't know what you think you know. As I said, if we applied that to court, the prosecution and defense both can always come up with possibilities, right, for anything. No, he wasn't murdered, he was kidnapped by aliens, right? Well, he has an alibi for the time of the murder, but maybe he's a time traveler, right? Ridiculous possibilities. You don't have to be able to prove them false to show that we shouldn't take them seriously. So, you might talk about the simulation possibility, right? For all you could be living in a computer simulation. If it were good enough, you'd never prove it wrong. You'd never know. But really, if this is all somebody can say, then it just seems like we have a pretty familiar idea. We could be wrong and never know it, dressed up in some sort of modern language about computers, right? Just find, replace, put computers in, and it's not that much different than anything Descartes said, right? So, if this sort of computer simulation argument is going to give us any more reason to worry that we're top to bottom mistaken about what we think about the world, it's going to have to go beyond just saying, well, you could be wrong, right? As I said, the skeptic seems to shift the burden of proof. The skeptic, the person who says we don't know anything or know what we think we know, he seems to shift the burden of proof to us. You have to prove that you can't possibly be wrong. Otherwise, you don't know anything. And as I said, I think the burden of proof is on the skeptic. The skeptic needs to show that we should take his skeptical possibility seriously. He needs to show we have good reason to think that this skeptical possibility, whether it's dreaming or, powerful, not very nice being, or computer simulation, the skeptic has to give us reason to think that that is a serious possibility, right? Think about the example I gave in a court case. There's a difference between, well, Your Honor, he could have and members of the jury, he could have faked his disappearance. That's possible, doesn't give us any reason to think he did. And, well, he has faked his disappearance in the past for a shorter period of time. Maybe he's just done it for a longer period of time this time, right? The first wouldn't give you any reason to doubt, that this person has been murdered, or at least not much. The second would, right? And so what the skeptic needs to show is that the doubt that we have knowledge is alive in this second way. He needs us to give us a positive reason to take his skeptical possibility seriously. Not enough that he shows that it could be true and that we can't completely prove it false. He has to show that it has some real likelihood, real chance of being true. Well, among other things, that's one of the things Bostrom tries to do. Bostrom tries to say, well, okay, it's not just the case that you could be living in a computer simulation, and if it were good enough, you'd never know. I will give you positive reasons to think that it's more likely than not you are living in a simulation. I will show you that you are more likely than not living in a simulation. It has a higher degree of probability than that this is the real world. How high a degree of probability? Very high, according to Bostrom. He thinks it's probably over 90%. He thinks it's way over 90%. Or at least he seems to. He kind of waffles. There might be another possibility. We'll talk about that in a second. But, he seems mostly to think it, that it's greater than 90%. We're almost certainly living in a computer simulation of some sort. Now, why in the world would Bostrom think that? Well, look, the fact I'm using words like probability, probably, likely, 90%, that should clue you in that this is an inductive argument, right? Inductive arguments are about what is probably true, likely true, right? Unlike deductive arguments, which we've focused on so far, an inductive argument gives you reason to think it likely. A good inductive argument, the premises can be true, and there's always some chance the conclusion is false. Chance might be very small. Bostrom thinks, this we're living in a simulation. Chance is very small, but there's still a chance. All right. So before we get into Bostrom's argument, though, since we are dealing with an inductive argument and we really haven't talked too much about inductive arguments so far, in the next lecture, I want to take a step back, talk about inductive arguments. Just a quick review and build a little bit more on what we talked about in the introductory lecture.